Happy birthday, sweetie. I forced a smile, adjusting the tiny, glittering crown on my daughter Daisy's head. Her bright blue eyes, so like mine, sparkled with delight as she clapped along to the off-key singing of our guests. I'm Evelyn, and today my little girl was turning 5. 5 years of sleepless nights, scraped knees, and a love so fierce it often left me breathless. 5 years, too, of quietly rebuilding a life my brother Julian had nearly shattered. He was supposed to be here, my twin, my best friend once, but a bitter silence had stretched between us for months, a chasm carved by a betrayal too deep to ignore. Just as I leaned in to help Daisy blow out the candles, a booming voice cut through the cheerful chaos. Attention, everyone, a special announcement. My heart sank. It was our father, George, beaming at the door, Julian just behind him, a smug smirk plastered across his face. My stomach clenched. This wasn't an olive branch. This was an invasion. My son Julian has finally decided to embrace his destiny, George declared, his chest puffed out. He's taking over the family legacy, the old Havenwood estate. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The Havenwood estate, our ancestral home. The place where my late grandmother, Clara, had raised us, weaving tales of resilience and heritage. The very house she'd promised me in her will, knowing my deep connection to its history, my dedication to preserving it. A promise George and Julian had conveniently misplaced after her passing. My best friend, Scarlett, caught my eye, her expression mirroring my disbelief. Daisy, oblivious, clapped her hands. Havenwood, Grandpa Havenwood. Julian finally stepped forward, his eyes, cold and assessing, landing on me. It's time someone took proper care of it, Evelyn, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. You've been distracted. He gestured vaguely around my modest living room, filled with Daisy's toys and my design samples. The implication was clear. My life, my choices, were somehow lesser. Distracted? I echoed, my voice tight. By raising my daughter, by building a successful small business that actually contributes to the community. A business, might I add, that actually pays its own bills, unlike some other ventures. I couldn't resist the jab. Julian's past business attempts were notoriously short-lived and detritus. Yes, well, George interrupted, stepping in front of Julian, a protective hand on his shoulder. The Havenwood estate needs a man's touch, a strong hand to truly bring it back to its former glory. Julian's vision for a modern luxury resort will finally unlock its true potential. He spoke as if I weren't even in the room, addressing the other guests. My blood ran cold. The Havenwood estate wasn't meant to be a luxury resort. It was a sanctuary, a living testament to generations of my family's connection to the land. Clara's dream, the one she'd shared with me countless times, was for it to be a wildlife sanctuary and educational center, a place where local nature could thrive and be appreciated. My dream, and, Julian added, a triumphant gleam in his eyes, we've decided it's time to renovate. Completely. We're breaking ground next month. All those old, dilapidated outbuildings, the overgrown trails, they're all coming down. The words hit me like a physical blow. Renovate. That meant ripping out Clara's beloved native wildflower garden, tearing down the antique birdhouses in the sunroom, erasing every trace of the woman who had nurtured us both. My grandmother, whose memory was now being desecrated for profit. My eyes flicked to Alina, my mother, who simply offered a placating smile, a silent plea for me to keep the peace. You can't, I whispered, my voice barely audible above the rising buzz of excited chatter among the guests. You can't destroy everything. Julian's smirk widened. Oh, but we can, Evelyn, and we will. It's the family's future, after all. A future you clearly weren't ready for. A future that requires bold vision, not sentimental attachments to weeds and old wood. I looked at Daisy, then at my parents, their faces beaming with pride at Julian, as if he'd just announced a cure for cancer. And then I looked at Julian, a stranger wearing my brother's face, his eyes gleaming with a ruthless ambition I'd never seen before. Congratulations, Julian, I said, my voice eerily calm, though my hands were trembling. I hope you enjoy your new toy. The words were a bitter offering, laced with a promise of my own, because they didn't know what I knew. Some heirlooms, once discarded, can never be reclaimed. And some fires, once lit, burn everything in their path. The birthday cake sat untouched, its candles still flickering. No one seemed to notice. You're actually going to let them do it? Scarlett's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence of my landscape design studio. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating swatches of eco-friendly materials and intricate botanical sketches scattered across my drafting table. The aroma of freshly brewed tea filled the air, a small comfort. They're going to turn your grandmother's legacy into some kind of soulless corporate monstrosity, a luxury resort with paved trails and fake waterfalls. Clara would roll over in her grave. I traced the outline of the Havenwood estate on an old photograph, a ghost of its former self, a place of wild beauty and quiet corners. They think they are, I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. What's that supposed to mean, Evelyn? Scarlett demanded, leaning forward, her fiery red hair almost touching the blueprints. Don't tell me you've got some grand plan brewing. You've been so quiet about this for months. Did you know that Clara left me a personal letter? I began, pushing away the photograph. Not in the will, but hidden in her favorite nature journal, the one she kept under the floorboards in the old study at Havenwood. She knew. Scarlett's eyebrows shot up. Knew what? That George and Julian would be, well, them. Exactly, I affirmed, pulling out a worn, slightly yellowed envelope, the paper soft with age. She wrote about Marcus and Julian. She wrote about how they'd always prioritize progress and profit over true value. She wrote about the Havenwood estate as a symbol of our family's connection to nature, of the importance of protecting endangered species and providing educational opportunities. She told me to fight for it, but to fight on my own terms. Not to descend to their level. Not to engage in their petty power plays, but to use the legal framework that she had painstakingly laid out. And your terms are? Scarlett asked, her voice hushed, sensing the gravity of the moment. I spread a new set of ecological surveys and copies of old land deeds across the table. They're so focused on modernizing it, they haven't bothered to look at the extensive, legally binding wildlife conservation easements that were attached to Clara's original purchase of the property decades ago, or the meticulously structured trust she established specifically to oversee these easements and ensure her wishes were upheld, long after she was gone. Scarlett gasped, leaning closer, her eyes scanning the complex legal jargon. You found a loophole, a big one. More than a loophole, I corrected, a triumphant gleam in my eye. An ironclad, legally binding covenant that states any major alteration to the natural habitats or designated educational zones within the Havenwood estate must be approved by a designated family trustee, appointed by Clara. And that trustee has the power to veto any plans that deviate from her specific vision for conservation and education. A vision clearly articulated in the trust documents. And who's the trustee? Scarlett asked, her voice barely a whisper. I picked up a pen, a mischievous glint in my eye. Surprise! It's me. Eleanor appointed me as the sole trustee, citing my deep understanding of nature's inherent value and a demonstrable commitment to stewardship, inherited from a lineage of environmental guardians. Her words, not mine. Scarlett let out a whoop of delight, startling my studio cat, Leo, ironically. Evelyn, you sly fox. So, while they're planning their grand demolition, you're sitting on the ecological equivalent of a nuclear bomb, primed and ready to detonate. Exactly. But they're so busy celebrating their victory and dismissing my capabilities, the quiet, tree-hugging sister who prefers dirt to dollars, that they won't even consider I've read the fine print, much less understood it. I gestured to the phone in my hand. Just got a text from Julian. He's already calling resort designers, demanding I clear out my old gardening tools from the main shed by next week. He thinks I'm vacating, leaving them a clear path. And you're not, Scarlett finished, a wide grin spreading across her face. I'm merely preparing for a different kind of development, I said, tapping the documents. One where their plans for the Havenwood estate go up in smoke, and Clara's vision, the true legacy, finally comes to life. The next morning, I stood in the main shed of the Havenwood estate, dust motes dancing in the sunlight that streamed through the grimy windows. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and dried leaves, a comforting scent that always brought back memories of Clara. Boxes of old gardening books and forgotten childhood nature guides were stacked around me, waiting to be properly archived and protected. Julian's text had been curt, bordering on demanding, shed clear by Friday. Construction crews need access. Don't make this difficult, Evelyn. He thought I was leaving. He thought I was giving up. Instead, I was mapping. Every tree, every overgrown path, every hidden spring. Clara's final letter had hinted at ecological secrets, hidden caches of rare seeds, and even detailed observations of migratory bird patterns, and I intended to uncover them all. This wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about honoring her memory, about reclaiming what was truly ours, a natural heritage, not a financial asset. "What are you looking for, Mama?" Daisy's voice startled me, bringing me back to the present. My mother, Alina, had brought her over, feigning concern about my emotional state and offering to help me pack up my things. In reality, I knew she was here to ensure I wasn't doing anything to jeopardize Julian's glorious new venture. A subtle surveillance mission disguised as maternal care. "Just exploring, sweetie," I replied, forcing a lightness to my voice as I rummaged through a box of old field guides. Like Grandma Clara used to. She loved finding new plants and creatures here. Alina appeared in the doorway, a forced sympathetic smile on her face, but her eyes were already scanning the shed, assessing the progress of my packing. "Evelyn, darling, you know how hard this is for Julian. He's trying to make a name for himself. This is his chance to shine, to prove himself to your father. By destroying Clara's legacy," I countered, my voice sharper than I intended. I pulled out an old, leather-bound book, Clara's personal log of the estate's flora and fauna, meticulously detailed with sketches and observations. "No, by improving it." George's voice boomed from behind Alina, making Daisy jump. He strolled into the shed, surveying the dusty space with distaste, wrinkling his nose at the scent of damp earth and old wood. "This old place is a money pit. All those unused acres, the wildlife. Julian's vision is modern, lucrative. A 5-star resort, golf courses, exclusive hunting lodges. You should be proud of your brother, Evelyn. He's finally thinking big." "I am," I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. "I'm very proud of his ambition. And I'm sure he'll be very proud of what he achieves here." My words were laced with a double meaning that was completely lost on them. George scoffed. "Still being cryptic, Evelyn. Look, we just want this to be smooth. No drama. We're family. We should be supporting each other, not creating unnecessary obstacles." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is that what we are? When was the last time either of you asked me about my landscape design business? Or about Daisy's schooling, her little triumphs, her worries? Or even just how I'm doing, beyond a superficial check-in about my emotional state?" Alina looked away, uncomfortable, fiddling with the clasp on her handbag. George cleared his throat. "Well, you've always been so independent, Evelyn. You never needed us like Julian did. He's always been a bit lost, prone to making poor investments without proper guidance." "Lost?" I scoffed, a dry laugh escaping me. "He was always given everything, handed opportunity after opportunity, bailaid out of every failed venture, while I worked for every single thing I have, built my business from the ground up with no handouts. And now he's trying to take the last thing Clara left for me, not just the property, but her very essence, her life's work." "It's not taking, dear," Alina said, trying to soothe me, her voice falsely sweet. "It's a new chapter for the family, a way to secure our financial future for generations." "It is," I agreed, a chilling resolve settling over me. "A very new chapter indeed." My phone vibrated, a subtle buzz against my thigh. A text from my lawyer, Daniel. "Clara's Trust, Clause 4C, Environmental Protection Clauses, ready when you are." I subtly typed back, "Execute next Monday, no warning. Let them be surprised." George pulled out a blueprint, unfurling it across an old workbench, oblivious to my hidden communication. "We're thinking of redirecting this creek here, Evelyn, turning it into a beautiful, serpentine water feature for the resort. It'll be a stunning centerpiece for the main lodge." He pointed to a thin blue line on the paper. "That creek is a critical salmon spawning habitat," I said quietly, without looking up from the old bird-watching guide I was examining. "And it's protected by federal law, specifically the Endangered Species Act, due to the rare species of trout that breed there. You redirect that, and you might just face massive environmental fines, not to mention a federal investigation." George chuckled, a dismissive sound. "Always the little nature enthusiast, aren't you? Leave the real work to the professionals, Evelyn. Engineers, architects, people who understand grand design, not just weeds." "Oh, I intend to," I said, finally looking at him, a glint in my eye that he clearly misinterpreted. The real professionals. The ones who actually understand ecological preservation and federal environmental law. Daisy tugged on my hand, her voice a joyful whisper. Mama, look. A baby bunny? She pointed to a section of the shed wall, partially hidden behind a forgotten pile of burlap sacks. Peeking out from behind a stack of old gardening pots was a tiny, trembling rabbit, its nose twitching. My heart leaped. Another discovery, just as Clara promised, a tiny victory for nature. That's right, sweetie, I whispered, and some discoveries are worth fighting for. Some life is worth protecting. The morning of the groundbreaking ceremony was crisp and clear, almost deceptively serene. The Havenwood estate stood proudly under a brilliant blue sky, its ancient trees swaying gently in the breeze, oblivious to the drama about to unfold. A small crowd had gathered on the manicured lawn. Local dignitaries in their finest suits, potential investors with expectant smiles, and a smattering of curious neighbors who had probably heard the rumors of the family squabble. George beamed, shaking hands with important-looking men, his chest puffed out with pride. Julian, dressed in a new, impeccably tailored suit, looked like the cat who'd swallowed the canary, his eyes scanning the crowd, already imagining himself at the helm of his grand resort. I arrived with Scarlett, blending into the periphery of the crowd, Daisy clutching my hand, her eyes wide with curiosity at the spectacle. We stood quietly at the back, observing the pre-ceremony buzz. A large banner, strung between two majestic oak trees, proclaimed, "The Havenwood Estate, a new luxury experience Julian Sterling's vision." My stomach churned. This wasn't a new beginning. It was an erasure, a calculated attempt to wipe away everything Clara had built and cherished. George stepped up to the podium, a gleaming golden shovel propped dramatically beside him. He adjusted the microphone, a self-important grin plastered across his face. Friends, family, esteemed guests, today marks a new era for the Havenwood Estate, a symbol of progress, innovation, and unparalleled prosperity for our community. Julian has worked tirelessly to bring this dream to fruition. He launched into a grand, self-congratulatory speech about Julian's bold vision, his unwavering dedication, and the untapped potential of the property, painting a picture of exclusive amenities and unprecedented financial gains. I felt a cold, unwavering calm settle over me. It was time. Just as Marcus gestured for Julian to approach the ceremonial dirt pile, shovel in hand, Daniel, my lawyer, stepped forward. He wasn't dressed in a suit, but a smart casual jacket, making him seem like another curious onlooker, yet his presence commanded attention. He held a thick file, its contents about to explode like a well-timed firework. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying surprising authority, cutting through George's grand pronouncements. "I believe there's been a slight oversight before we proceed with this groundbreaking." George frowned, his smile faltering. "Who are you? This is a private family event." "Daniel Reynolds," he replied, holding up the file for all to see. "Legal representative for the Clara Sterling Wildlife Preservation Trust. And as such, I am here to ensure all proper legal procedures are followed." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Julian's confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Under the terms of the trust established by Clara Sterling herself," Daniel continued, his voice clear and resonant, "any significant alteration to the ecological habitats or designated educational zones within the Havenwood Estate requires the express written consent of the designated family trustee, appointed by Miss Sterling herself, with the oversight of the trust board. These are legally binding environmental easements, duly filed and upheld by law." George scoffed, regaining some of his bluster. "That's old news, son. That trust was superseded, irrelevant. My son is the rightful owner, the designated heir to this property." "Actually," Daniel interjected, his voice firm, "the trust was not only recently activated by a court order, but its powers and the environmental easements it oversees were unequivocally confirmed. And the designated trustee, with full veto power over any plans that deviate from Clara's stated intention for conservation and education, is Miss Evelyn Sterling." He gestured directly towards me. A collective gasp went through the crowd, followed by a flurry of whispers. Heads swiveled. George's face turned beet red, a vein throbbing in his temple. Julian's jaw dropped, the golden shovel clattering to the ground as he stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and pure, unadulterated fury. "Evelyn," George spluttered, his voice hoarse. "This is preposterous. You don't know anything about this. You're just a gardener." "Oh, but I do, father," I said, stepping forward, the crowd parting for me as I walked towards the podium. My voice was steady, my stride firm. I pulled out a copy of Clara's letter, carefully laminated, and the notarized trustee appointment, holding them up for all to see. Every single word. Eleanor always wanted the Havenwood estate to be a place for the community, for nature, for preservation. Not a sterile, commercial resort. "This is a trick," Julian yelled, his face contorted with rage, lunging towards me. "You always were jealous. You couldn't handle that I was finally taking charge." "Jealous?" I met his angry gaze, unwavering. "I'm protecting what's ours, Julian, what Clara entrusted to me. You were too busy chasing quick profits to care about her real legacy, about the delicate ecosystem she spent her life protecting, about the educational opportunities she envisioned for generations to come." A distinguished-looking woman in the crowd, a renowned botanist and environmental activist named Dr. Eris Thorne, whom I discreetly contacted weeks ago, stepped forward. "Eleanor Sterling was a fierce advocate for ecological preservation," she announced, her voice carrying authority. "If this is true, Miss Sterling, then many of us in the scientific and conservation communities would wholeheartedly support your efforts to preserve her vision against this blatant disregard for environmental law." George, cornered, stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is a family matter, a misunderstanding. We can discuss this internally." "It's a legal matter, Mr. Sterling," Daniel corrected calmly, stepping between George and the now muttering crowd. "And unless Miss Sterling, as the appointed trustee, gives her express consent, no groundbreaking can occur, and no ecological alterations can proceed without facing severe legal repercussions, including substantial fines and potential criminal charges for environmental damage." He spoke with a quiet menace that left no room for doubt. Julian looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage, disbelief, and a dawning sense of defeat. "You played us, Evelyn. You really played us." "You underestimated me," I corrected, "just like you always have. You saw me as the quiet one, the sentimental one, the one who would just roll over. But Clara taught me that true strength lies in protecting what's vulnerable, and that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power." I took a deep breath and addressed the now silent crowd, my voice ringing with a newfound clarity. "The Havenwood estate will not be a luxury resort. It will be a wildlife sanctuary and educational center. A place for the community and for nature, just as Clara intended." George grabbed Julian's arm, his face pale. "We'll fight this, Evelyn. You won't get away with this." I simply smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "You're welcome to try, father, but I think you'll find Clara's legacy is far stronger than you ever imagined." As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with the unexpected drama, many offering me nods of support and whispers of "good for you," I took Daisy's hand. "Come on, sweetie," I said. "Let's go home to our real home." The Havenwood estate stood tall and proud, bathed in sunlight, and for the first time in years, it felt like it was finally breathing again. The golden shovel lay forgotten in the dirt. The fallout was immediate and messy. My phone, once filled with angry texts from Julian and my parents, now buzzed with calls from local media and enthusiastic environmental groups. "Evelyn Sterling, the defender of Clara's legacy," one headline blared from the local paper. "Havenwood Estate saved from corporate greed," another declared, emblazoned across a popular online nature blog. George and Julian, meanwhile, were fuming, their public statements oscillating between outright denial and vague threats of legal action. "They're threatening a lawsuit," Scarlett said, pouring us both strong coffee in my new, surprisingly spacious and bright apartment. The walls were already adorned with framed botanical prints and photos of Daisy laughing in natural settings. Daisy was at school, and the quiet allowed for serious conversation, though the occasional chirp of a house sparrow outside my window was a pleasant distraction. "Let them," I replied, scrolling through a draft budget for the wildlife sanctuary. "Daniel's already prepared for it. He says their legal standing is about as solid as a sandcastle in a hurricane." "Are you prepared for the family war this will unleash, Evelyn?" Scarlett asked, her brow furrowed. "Because this isn't just about property anymore. This is about deep-seated resentment and bruised egos. I sighed, staring out at the city skyline, a stark contrast to the wild expanse of Havenwood. It's already unleashed, Scarlet. This is just a different battleground. For years, I've lived with their constant dismissals, their casual cruelty, their assumption that I would always bend to their will. This is simply the culmination of all that. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings. With Daniel, my lawyer, who had become a trusted advisor, with preservation societies, eager to lend their expertise, with environmental experts, who saw the immense potential of Havenwood, and with architects who understood Clara's original vision for sustainable, nature-friendly structures. Support poured in from unexpected corners, former students of Clara's from her days as a university lecturer, local artists who valued community spaces, even distant relatives who remembered her quiet passion for the natural world. Many offered volunteer hours, excited to be part of something meaningful. Then came the call from my mother, Eleanor. Her voice was strained, devoid of its usual forced cheerfulness, replaced by a brittle edge. "Evelyn, your father. He's beside himself. He hasn't slept. And Julian, he's barely speaking to us. He's talking about moving out of state. You've ruined his career prospects, his reputation. Perhaps they should have considered that before trying to bulldoze over Clara's wishes, Mother," I said, without a trace of sympathy. "Before trying to profit from a legacy that was never meant for their kind of progress." "But we're family," she pleaded, her voice rising slightly. "Can't you just compromise, let them have a small part of it for their resort? A small lodge, maybe, just to save face, for your father's sake." "Compromise on a legacy?" I asked, a bitter laugh escaping me. "No, Mother. Clara didn't compromise on her dreams, and neither will I. This isn't a negotiation. This is about protecting what's right. But they're saying you did this out of spite, that you're trying to ruin Julian's life because you're jealous of him. Julian is ruining himself by being greedy and disrespectful. Mother," I shot back, my voice firm, "by thinking that everything has a price tag and that sentimentality is a weakness. And if protecting Eleanor's dream is spiteful, then I wear that label with pride. I'm not jealous. I'm just no longer a doormat." The conversation ended with a sharp click. The silence that followed felt not like a void, but like a vast, open space. A few days later, a familiar face appeared at my doorstep. My Aunt Beverly, Clara's younger sister, whom I hadn't seen in years, not since Clara's funeral. She looked weary, her face etched with the lines of a life lived, but her eyes held a spark of defiance, a shared understanding. "I heard what you did, Evelyn," she said, pulling me into a warm, unexpected hug. "Eleanor would be so proud. She's probably smiling down on you from the highest branch in Havenwood." "You think so?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. I'd always longed for a deeper connection with Beverly, but my parents had subtly discouraged it over the years, deeming her too unconventional. "I know so. She always worried that her boys, George and Julian, would misunderstand her, that they'd only see the dollar signs, not the wonder. She saw the protector in you, Evelyn, the one who truly understood her heart, her deep connection to the earth." Beverly pulled a small, tarnished silver compass from her purse, its surface smooth from years of handling. "She gave this to me years ago, told me to hold on to it until the time was right. Said it was a reminder that some things, true value, can't be bought or sold, and that true north is often found by following your heart, not the loudest voices or the most tempting promises of wealth." I opened the compass. Inside, a tiny, elegant arrow pointed unwaveringly to the north. Tears welled in my eyes. It was a simple object, yet it felt like a direct message from Clara, a confirmation that I was finally on the right path. "So," Beverly said, a sly smile touching her lips, "what can I do to help you protect it? I've got plenty of free time and a lifetime of Clara's stories to share. And I know a thing or two about organizing volunteers." Her arrival was a turning point. Aunt Beverly became an invaluable ally, sharing stories of Clara's life, helping me connect with old friends of hers, and even offering to volunteer extensively at the future wildlife sanctuary and educational center. It was a stark contrast to my parents and Julian, who remained steadfast in their anger, refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of my claim, doubling down on their accusations of betrayal. The family dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked daughter, the one who had to beg for attention. I was the guardian of a legacy, the leader of a burgeoning community movement. And for the first time, I felt truly powerful, truly aligned with my purpose. The scent of fresh earth and native wildflowers filled the air, a sweet, earthy perfume that was Havenwood's true essence. Sunlight streamed through the restored windows of the main lodge, illuminating vibrant, hand-painted murals depicting local wildlife and intricate exhibits detailing the region's unique ecosystem. Today was the grand opening of Clara's Sanctuary, a wildlife and educational center. It had been a long, arduous year of tireless work, of navigating legal battles and coordinating volunteers. The lawsuit from George and Julian had been swift, and just as swiftly, dismissed with a definitive ruling in my favor. The extensive publicity surrounding the case had drawn even more support, attracting substantial grants and donations from across the state and beyond. Volunteers, passionate and dedicated, had poured their hearts into restoring the Havenwood estate, preserving its natural habitats, clearing invasive species, and integrating modern educational facilities and accessible viewing platforms. The transformation was breathtaking. Daisy, now 6, skipped through the sunlit halls, her laughter echoing, pointing at a display of local birds. "Mama, look, robins and a blue jay." Scarlett clapped me on the shoulder, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You did it, Evelyn. You actually did it. This place is even more beautiful than I imagined." Aunt Beverly, looking radiant in a custom-embroidered vest, bustled past, guiding a group of local school children to a nature observation deck, her voice animated as she pointed out a nesting hawk. The entire place was buzzing with life, with children's excited chatter, with quiet conversations among nature enthusiasts, with the gentle hum of discovery. It was exactly as Clara had envisioned. Suddenly, the front doors opened, and in walked George and Alina. They looked out of place, their expensive clothes and stiff postures a stark contrast to the relaxed, nature-focused atmosphere. Their faces were etched with a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and perhaps a hint of something unreadable regret, perhaps. Julian was nowhere to be seen. Alina approached me tentatively, her voice a little softer than usual. "Evelyn, this is beautiful. I never imagined it could be like this." "It's Clara's vision, Mother," I said, my voice calm, devoid of the defensiveness that used to define our interactions. Brought to life by the community that believed in her. George, however, was still rooted in his old ways. He scowled at a group of children excitedly examining a display of native insects. "It's a money pit, Evelyn. All these educational programs, all this conservation. How will it sustain itself? Where's the profit margin in protecting a few salamanders?" "Not everything has to be about profit, Father," I countered, meeting his gaze directly. "Some things are about conservation, about heritage, about stewardship, about giving back to the natural world that sustains us. Things you and Julian seem to have conveniently forgotten in your pursuit of a quick buck." "We just want what's best for the family," Alina interjected, her eyes darting around nervously, sensing the tension. "And I'm providing it," I said, gesturing to the buzzing activity around us, to the joyful faces of the children, to the quiet satisfaction of the volunteers. A place that truly honors Clara, that provides a vital space for nature to thrive, and that belongs to the community, not just one person's bank account. This is a legacy that will last, unlike Julian's temporary resorts. A little boy, no older than Daisy, ran up to Alina, holding up a small, painted wooden bird he'd just made in the crafts corner. "Look what I made. I got to do it here, with real bird feathers." Alina's expression softened almost imperceptibly, a fleeting moment of genuine wonder crossing her face as she looked at the child's proud creation. "We hoped you'd come," I said, looking at my parents, a silent invitation in my tone. Alina always believed in second chances, even for those who misunderstood her. She believed that even the most stubborn hearts could find their way back to nature's truth. George grumbled, running a hand over his thinning hair. Julian's still furious. "He says you stole his opportunity, his whole future." "He was trying to steal Clara's legacy," I corrected him, the distinction crucial. "There's a difference, and this place. This is his opportunity too, if he ever chooses to see it." As they wandered slowly through the center, I noticed them pausing, looking at old photographs of Clara displayed on the walls, at her handwritten notes on botanical specimens. They even spent a long moment gazing at her portrait, which hung proudly in the main hall, her kind eyes seeming to watch over the thriving sanctuary. Perhaps, for the first time, they were seeing her not as a means to an end, a source of property and inheritance, but as a person, a woman with profound dreams and a deep connection to the earth. Daisy ran up, pulling on my dress, her face beaming. "Mama, can we go see the turtles? I want to say hello to them." "Of course, sweetie," I said, bending down to kiss her forehead, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair. "This is our home now, our true home. A place where nature thrives and where we protect what truly matters." As I led Daisy towards the outdoor turtle habitat, I glanced back. George and Alina were still standing there, looking at Clara's portrait. Maybe, just maybe, some seeds of understanding were finally beginning to sprout in their hardened hearts. The Havenwood estate, once a symbol of betrayal and avarice, was now a beacon of redemption, not just for a neglected legacy, but for the possibility of mending fractured relationships, one protected habitat, one shared moment of quiet appreciation at a time. The discarded heirloom was, finally, reclaimed, and its true value shone brighter than any imagined profit.